Hi. I'm so sorry. I did not see you there. So, you're here, right? You're here for the stories in the dark. Yes. My name is Noah, and I am going to be the storyteller for today. I'm glad you were able to make it, and I'm actually very thankful for Iya for, you know, inviting me to tell a story to you guys. Because I love the stories, whether scary, whether it's romance, whether it's fantasy. But I guess for today, I have to tell something a little bit creepy or a little bit scary, I guess. It's up to you, really. And I will tell that. First, I will tell you a story first before I write my own in this beautiful, beautiful notebook that Iya gave me. So, are you ready? Because I am now. Boss X by Yvette Tan. He was the first thing Bien saw as he came up the escalator of the third floor of Vita Mall. The man was about a 5'3" to Bien's 6-foot frame. His extremely short hair was unevenly cut. His dark eyes, watchful, darting back and forth, even as they focused on Bien. He sidled up to Bien, a big smile on his pock-marked face. "Boss X?" he asked. The modus operandi was that the buyer would follow the hawker to some back room in the mall where he would get to pick from a wide range of X-rated and sometimes illegal films. Years ago, Bien would have followed the man to check out his wares, but he had outgrown that sort of entertainment during college. He walked past the man and into the nearest tunnels of shops. He had been told that the mall hasn't changed much since its renovation in the early part of the 21st century. The outside was lined with trendy shops and restaurants, while its inside was filled with small stalls and back alley shops that sold everything from books and clothes on the first floor to advanced cybernetic electronics, and, it was rumored, weapons on the second floor. And hobby kits and pirated movie microchips on the third. This last item was what interested Bien. He was and always had been a movie buff. He collected everything from silent comedies to the recently released virtual movies whose audience could feel, smell, and sometimes taste what they were seeing and hearing. He entered a shop that sold microchip movies, displaying the little chips like they would display pirated CDs and DVDs decades ago. Bien was lucky to have come across the relics while sifting through the junk that dated from his grandfather's bachelor's days. Most people had only heard about the disc from the stories their parents or grandparents told. "Hey, Bien!" The man behind the counter greeted him. "Has it come in yet?" Bien asked. "Yup, just got in this morning," the man replied. "You're lucky. The Celios movies are hard to find, especially this one." He laid a chip on the counter. Bien picked it up. "Living in oblivion," he read aloud. "How much do I owe you?" The man shrugged. "I won't charge you for the finder's fee for that one, since it sort of just fell into my lap. Besides, you're a regular." "Thanks, Mike," Bien said. "That's all I've come for today." Mike nodded, wrapping the chip in butcher paper and placing it in a small bag made of bubble wrap. "When's the wedding?" he asked, taking out the scanner and holding it in front of Bien's forehead. "The day after tomorrow," Bien replied. "And you're here shopping?" "It's not often that I can get my hand on a desilio," Bien replied. "Excuses, excuses," Mike said. "You're scared, man. I can see you wetting your pants. Happens to everyone." "Sometimes I can't believe it myself," Bien said. "I keep wondering if I can still run away." "That's how everyone feels," Mike said. "Still, being married isn't as bad as people make it out to be. I count myself lucky that I enjoy it. Hold still." He pushed one of the many buttons on the scanner's handle. A red dot appeared in the middle of Bien's forehead. "A bit to the right," Bien said automatically. "Oh fuck," Mike said, following his lead. "I always forget." "I always hate this part," Bien said. "Makes me think a sniper's got his sights trained on me." "Then why don't you relocate to your hand it then?" Mike asked. He pushed another button. The scanner made a high-pitched sound, which meant that it was reading the ID chip in Bien's forehead, verifying Bien's identity, reading how much money he had in his account, and subtracting the price of the newly purchased movie from it. "Too much trouble. Maybe when I get it upgraded. I'll think about relocating it to my hand." He moved away after the scanner has finished its business, picked up the chip, dropped it into his shirt pocket. "Thanks, Mike." "Anytime." The man appeared beside him as soon as he stepped out of the shop. "Boss X?" he asked, his smile so wide Bien could count the gaps between his teeth. Ben walked past him, hoping that he would take the hint, but the man followed. "Boss X?" His voice raspy and excited, like a child who couldn't wait to show off his new toy. Ben knew that what the man sold wasn't anything he couldn't get anywhere else. They had everything now: women, men, animals, even cyborgs, dead, alive, comatose, you name it. The chip hounds would have it, all neatly packed inside their reporters' jackets or trench coats. Every pleasure of perversion under the sun. He tried to walk faster, but the man kept up, turning corners when Bien did and patiently waiting outside stores that Bien would try to hide inside. He was still there when Bien emerged from a comic book store, that childlike excitement still on his face. "Boss X?" he asked. "Go away," Bien said. "You've been hounding me for the past hour. Can't you see I'm not interested?" "Of course you aren't," the man said. "That's because you haven't seen what I have to offer." He opened his jacket and took out the chip, his thumb hiding the words on the label. "Listen," Bien said exasperatedly. "Do I look like a high school student? You'd do better selling your wares to a much younger crowd." The man shook his head. "Nope," he said, waving the chip in Bien's face. "Won't do. It has to be you, Bien." "How do you know my name?" Bien said, his anger changing to surprise. The man shrugged. "It's not important, especially after you see my goods." All Bien wanted to see were his hands around the man's neck, but he held his cool. He hated to admit it, but he was curious. He looked around. They were still in front of the comic book shop, which was packed with comic geeks and card game aficionados. Across them was a network of gaming plays where about a dozen people were strapped into virtual visions or VVs. the virtual reality unit that had replaced television a decade ago, and were busy trying to kill each other in the newest video game. Nobody was paying them any attention. Bien was torn. He really wasn't interested in what the man was peddling. On the other hand, how did he know his name? Besides, he was getting married in 2 days. That last thought did it. "All right," Bien said. "How much?" 100 peso credits, the man said, citing the normal amount for a microchip. "Don't I at least get a discount?" Bien asked. "After all, you shoved this on me." The man said, "Believe me, Bien, after you see what I'm about to show you, you'll agree that 100 credits is too low a price." He walked away and Bien followed. They entered one of the less populated hallways, one of the ones near a wing that was being renovated. The man held open a door that looked like a part of the wall, motioning Bien to enter. The room was small and sparsely furnished. There were 2 chairs and table covered with a long cloth on one corner, just to the right of the virtual vision unit that sat in the center. "I hope you didn't bring me here just to show me snuff films," Bien said, eyeing his surroundings with distaste. The man ignored his question. He pointed to the VV. "Strap yourself in." "Look," Bien said, hoping he didn't sound as scared as he suddenly felt. Visions of the man slicing his throat as soon as he was seated crossed his mind. The man said, "I'm not going to mug you, if that's what you're thinking." Ben shrugged. The situation was weird enough. Why not see where it would lead? He sat on one of the chairs. "Pay first," the man said. Bien waited as the man produced a scanner and positioned it a bit to the right of the center of Bien's forehead. Bien idly wondered how the man knew where to scan. But the thought was forgotten when the man handed him a VV visor, big chunky goggles that he placed over his eyes. "Welcome, Rodell," the unit said in deep, masculine but obviously electronic voice. "What can I do for you?" "Hello, Hal," the man said. Bien could help chuckling at the computer's name. Rodell, though Bien doubted it was his real name, slipped a chip, which he had taken from a box under the table, into a slot in the VV. "My friend would like to watch a movie," he said. "As you wished," Hal replied. The VV's machinery began to whir as it began to read the information in the chip. "Playing Anna." Bien thought that Anna was a strange name for a porn star to use. Most of them had exotic names like Amber or Tiffany with an I. A screen appeared inside the visor, its emptiness dissolving into a riot of colors that swirled about before finally settling into a picture of a little girl. "Oh gods," Bien cursed. Rodell was right. This was worse. This was so much worse. The film had been shot like a home movie. The girl was about 7 and was dressed in a white sailor's blouse, a dark blue skirt, white socks, and black shoes. Her hair was cut short, almost like a boy's. She ran around the playground laughing and jumping, trying everything in sight. The swings and the merry-go-round, the monkey bars. She climbed up the slide, and just as she was about to slide down, the picture blurred and became static. The movie had ended. Bien didn't know how long he sat in front of the virtual vision, breathing heavily and ignoring Hal's repeated queries about what to do next. Gods, he thought. That was Anna. That was really Anna. What the fuck is going on? He had recognized her the minute the camera focused on her. Ana Bautista, 7 years old, grade 1. His first crush. He looked at Rodel, who gave him a smug smile. You like it, eh? I knew you would. I've got more where that came from, the man said. If you've been selling chips of Anna in the black market, I'll... Relaxed, Rodel said. It wasn't anything indecent, was it? And besides, Anna's your age now. Don't worry, Bien. It's one of a kind. You're the only one who has it. I don't understand, Bien said. How did you know? How could you have so many questions? Rodel said, opening his coat and holding 2 chips. Already bubble wrap. In front of Bien. Here's 2 more. Just 2? Bien exclaimed. He tried to snatch them from Rodel, but the other man held them out of his reach. I didn't know you'd be so hot for them right away. I'll have more tomorrow. Those will be 200 credits each. That's double what I paid for the first one. The man shrugged. You know the law of supply and demand, unless you don't want them, of course. Ben snatched the chips from the smiling man's hand and held his forehead out to be scanned. Bastard, he said, after the transaction was completed. Rodel gave him a meaningful smile, helped him out of the VV, and escorted him back to the familiar chaos of the mall. Ben took the chips out of their bubble wrapping. He read the labels, knowing with a sick dread that they would be. He was right. The first one read Karen. The second, Alice. He knew who Karen was, but who in the world was Alice? This must be a mistake, he said. Rodel shook his head. There are no mistakes, he said gravely. Not in your head. He ushered Ben back into the main area of the shopping mall, so fast that Ben had no time to ask him what he meant. Nice doing business with you, Rodel said, before melting into the crowd. Bien's cell phone was ringing when he got home. He always left it home when he wanted to be alone. He didn't bother reading caller ID. He already knew who it was. Sighing, he picked up the phone and took the call. Hi, Sheila, he said. Why have you been answering your phone, Bien? I've been calling you all day. You haven't forgotten dinner tonight, have you? Bien cursed. He had. He looked at the clock. It read 7 p.m. Their dinner with their parents was at 7:30. I'll be right over, he said. Are you all right, honey? Sheila asked, her voice changing from irritation to concern. You don't sound well. I'm okay, Bien said. You sound sick. Bien, listen, I'll tell Mama and Papa you can make it. You stay at home and rest, and I'll come over after dinner, all right? Somehow, Bien managed to convince his fiancée that she didn't have to come over and see to him. As long as you think you'll be fine on your own, she said uncertainly. Bien assured her that he would be. All right, I love you, Bien. Bien had wanted to say the words right back, but they caught in his throat for a second, and by the time he had them out, Sheila had put the phone down. Bien sighed, feeling guilty for brushing Sheila off like that. Bien realized he was trembling. He looked at the chips he had just bought, one of them a hard-to-find Desilio, the others... Minutes later, he found himself strapped into his VV. Welcome, Bien. Marlena, his visual vision muse, greeted him. What can I do for you? Hello, Marlena, Bien said. I'd like to watch a movie. As you wish. A slot opened and Bien placed a chip inside. Playing Karen. Karen Esguerra, 14 years old, his first girlfriend. She was a head taller than he was. Her long dark hair always managing to escape from the ponytail that held it. Her eyes were hidden under a curtain of lashes and she was biting her lower lip with determined concentration. She was in her high school uniform and seated at her desk. Part of what she was writing was visible at the corner of the screen. Bien could see that she was taking notes from Miss Toreliza's math class. The class where she had said yes to him, where they had agreed to each other's love forever and ever. Karen stirred, sensing that she was being watched. Her determined expression softened into a smile, but as she turned to face the camera, the screen went blank. Karen, Bien had forgotten about her too. They had broken up in college when going to different schools forced them to drift apart. It was only later when he accidentally met Karen coming out of her law firm in Makati, and when they had gone out for dinner and coffee, she did admit that their breakup had upset her so much it almost caused her to go on leave from university. There was an embarrassed silence filled with Bien's unspoken thought that the feeling was one-sided. Karen must have read his mind because she gave a small laugh and assured Bien that it had happened a long ago and that she was happily married now. It was only now sitting at his VV, the ghost of Karen's image fading on screen, that Bien realized that a little part of him still missed Karen, still wondered what happened to their promise to be each other's love forever and ever. He missed her. God, he missed her. What the fuck was Rodel doing to him? He asked Marlena to eject the Karen chip, replace it with the one labeled Alice, and held his breath as light flooded his vision, bringing him back to the past he had forgotten. The first image he saw was a glimpse of Brian's Delgado's face leaving the frame. Brian had been his partner in crime from grade school and now going to be his best man. Brian the mastermind, Bien the follower. They had done everything together. Suddenly, Bien remembered who Alice was. It wasn't her real name. It was something she told Bien when he asked. His first time in a massage parlor, his first time with a woman. It had been Brian's 18th birthday gift to him, something he had successfully forgotten over the years. Everything came rushing back before he could command Marlena to eject. There was pain, a dull throb in his heart from his breakup with Karen. There was excitement, the prospect of losing his virginity, coupled with the idea of having sex with someone he didn't know and was never going to see again. And then there was the fear of not knowing what to do, of the possibility of being horrible and not being able to perform. And behind all that, the unthinkable thought that maybe he wasn't ready. He had been surprised that Alice was so young. He had been less surprised to find that she was also very, very skilled. Bien pulled out of his VV, face red, breathing, ragged, yelling, "Eject, Marlena, eject! Eject Alice," Marlena's even digital voice said as the VV spewed out Alice's chip. Bien fumbled with the buckle, threw his goggles into the corner, and sank, trembling in front of the machine. "Shit," he whispered. "Shit, shit, shit, shit." When the last of his tremors had subsided and he was sure he could speak without breaking down, he picked up his cell phone and dialed Brian's number. "What's up, pare?" Brian greeted him. "I need your help," Bien said, unable to keep the worry from his voice. "Whoa, Bien. You okay, man?" Brian asked, concerned. "Is it Sheila?" Brian shook his head. "Not Sheila," he said. "Please, Brian," he implored. "Come over." "You're nuts, man," Brian said. Bien had just finished narrating the day's surreal events. "I am not kidding," Bien said wearily. "It's fucking real and it's freaking me out." You want we go beat up the guy?" Brian, a frat man at heart, asked. "It's not like that," Bien answered. "Just get in the VV, you'll see what I'm talking about. This isn't some sort of prank, right? Are you not going to help?" Bien asked, remembering how Brian could almost be a pain, often when he needed the most. All right, Brian said, sitting down and strapping himself in. Hello, Marlena, he said as he put the goggles over his Bien. My friend would like to watch a movie, Bien said, feeding the Karen chip. As you wished. Playing Karen. Bien held his breath as a red dot on the goggles blinked on, signaling that the chip was playing. He watched as what he could see of Brian's face registered shock, then recognition. They were in the same class after all. His hands clutching his armrest, his body heavily heaving slightly, his breath coming out of short gasps that crescented into a caricature of heavily breathing and obscene noises. Eject, Brian said angrily. As you wish, Marlena said, complying. Tang ina mo, Brian, Bien said angrily, snatching the goggles from Brian's head. This isn't funny. You're so uptight, pare, Brian chuckled. Wedding jitters getting to you? I'm serious, Bien wailed. Look, if you aren't going to help me, you can leave. Help you with what, pare? There was nothing in there but static. If you ask me, your problem is that you got a bum chip. What do you mean a bum chip? I was watching Karen Isguera on it a while ago. Dude, if this is our way of trying to relieve all your girls before you get hitched to the last one, it's a pretty sick way to be going about it, Brian said matter-of-factly. I'm not crazy, Bien said, getting to the VV. Play Karen, he instructed. The image of Karen flashed before him. He instructed Marlena to turn it off. You keep doing that, you'll break her, Brian said. Shut up, Bien said, annoyed that his best man wasn't helping him. It works fine. I didn't see anything, Brian repeated. Either you're making this up or it's one of those cosmic mythical shimagamajigs that only work with you. I mean, you are getting hitched in 2 days. I'm not scared, Bien yelled. Calm down, man, Brian said. I never said anything about you being scared, but that's very Freudian of you. Shut up, Bien mumbled. Just leave. Oh, don't do this to me, man, Brian said. I'm your best friend and your best man. If this bothers you the way you say it does, we'll get to the bottom of it. You sound like a hardy boy, Bien grumbled. That's the spirit, Brian said enthusiastically. First, we figure out what makes this baby tick. You got a toolbox? 5 hours later, they were still slumped as they were when they began. Are you sure you aren't hallucinating, pare? Brian asked. Bien dejected shook his head. They have disassembled and reassembled everything, the 3 rogue chips, Bien's extra chip of Attack of the Clones for comparison, a broken chip of Breakfast of Tiffany's, again, for comparison. Even the parts of Marlena that could be tinkered with without destroying her warranty, without finding anything suspicious. The 3 chips were like any ordinary chip. If anything, it was the broken Breakfast at Tiffany that was out of place, since part of it was scorched from misuse. Maybe we don't know what we're looking for, Bien said. Brian snorted. I used to reconfigure my dad's VV so that I could watch porn on it. I also had to reconfigure the porn because they were original chips and were always child-proofed. Believe me, I know what we're looking for. He gave Bien a pitying look. I don't want to sound harsh, but I wouldn't be a proper best man if I didn't say it. Maybe it isn't the chips. You have been acting strange since you proposed, and even stranger this past weeks, he said, cautiously. A bit too cautiously considering this was Brian. I'm fine, Bien snapped. I love Sheila. Getting married is the highlight of my life. Which explains why you are hallucinating your exes, Bien said wryly. If I sound stressed, it's because I'm tired of having to defend my upcoming wedding to everyone who talks to me, Bien said. Brian got up and put away the toolbox. I'm sorry, but all you are suffering from is wedding jitters. Relaxed. I hear that's normal, which is why you'll never catch me walking down the aisles. He pushed the chips towards Bien. These are just bum chips, man. Don't mistake them for anything else. After Brian left, Bien has strapped himself into the VV and played the Karen chip again. But this time, the 7-year-old girl was accompanied by a massive, sharp pain that emanated from the middle of his forehead. He yanked off the headset, tore away his VV straps, and ran to his bed, where he lay in the fetal position until the pain subsided, mentally kicking himself for not having figured it out all before. He couldn't wait to get to Green Hills. He sat up all night waiting for the clock to hit 9 a.m. so that he could get to the mall just as it opened, leaving his cell phone at home so that he would not be disturbed. He made a few wrong turns and got a little disoriented navigating the maze that made up the back of the second floor. But eventually, he found himself outside Rodel's room. He pushed at the door, was surprised when it opened in his slight touch. Rodel was inside. Bien, he said, opening his mouth in a toothy grin. How many have you got for me today? Bien asked wearily. Although mad at himself for being so curious, he had come to terms with his inability to resist Rodel's wares. He knew what was coming, the sequence of events etched in his heart and mind. He just had to see them unfold for himself. There was a perverse sense of delight to the exercise. He was seeing everything from a different perspective, from a detached point of view. It was like spying on himself, mentally masturbating to his past, wondering if things would have been different had he changed anything. What if he had told Anna about his feelings? Would she have understood? What if he had never broken up with Karen? Would they have fulfilled their promise of staying together forever? What about Alice and all the other women he knew Rodel would have be able to supply? Crushes, girlfriends, near lovers, one-night stands? A thought, stray but inevitable, wedged itself into his mind. What about Sheila? What about Sheila? He wasn't doing anything wrong. It's not as if he was cheating on her. And then there was Rodel. Rodel, who now smiled at him as he unstrapped himself and said, "The next 4 girls of your life, Bien," as if he were offering candy. I know how you do these things," Bien said. "I know why you picked me." Rodel's smile widened. "I knew you had figured it out by now." He got off the VV unit and motioned Bien to get in. Bien did as he was told. "What you have," Rodel said as he strapped Bien is something no one else has yet. He tapped Bien's forehead, not at the center but to the right where his IDC was located. "It's an anomaly, at least as far as we're concerned. Our IDCs contained everything about us that allow us to function as citizens. Identification, records, even money. What it isn't supposed to contain is memories. And because mine isn't located where it's supposed to be, it retains them," Bien finished, a slight worry creeping into his voice at the thought of his whole life laid bare before anyone with decent hacking skills to see. "It's not that simple," Rodel said, tightening the last of the straps. "The government doesn't know about it, so you don't have to worry about them catching up on anything illegal you've done. And believe it or not, it's even harder to hack into than a normally placed IDC. But you," Bien started. "Let's just say that I'm special," Rodel said, "and I wouldn't have found you if you had been so stressed. The technology keeps getting better, as you are about to see." He stood back. "My friend wants to watch a movie, Hal." "As you wished," the VV's computerized voice droned. "Playing Pia." Pia Escobar, the secretary at the accountancy firm where he had his OJT. She didn't care that he was in college, and it tickled her to no end that he would forget that he was saying whenever he was in front of her. This chip was longer than the others. The image was still scratchy and it had an orange tinge to it. But it was definitely clearer, and the best of all, it had sound. The Pia chip was a series of clips of his encounters with her. There was the first time he saw her. It was his first day at work and he had lost his way to his mentor's office. He had stopped by her cubicle to ask for directions. She was wearing a low-cut halter top that showed off just enough cleavage not to be considered indecent. When she pushed herself away from her desk, he could see that she was wearing a tight pinstripe mini. She had directed him to the correct office and he thought it was the last he would see her. Little did he know that he would be bumping into her during duration of his training. Her always teasing him about how he was so shy, always giggling at everything he tried to say. There were flashes of these encounters, complete with his lame jokes and her high-pitched laughter. And of course, her outfits whose necklines seemed to get lower and whose skirts length seemed to get shorter as each scene passed. Bien could feel himself trembling, could hear his breath getting sharper and shallower, could feel the sweat beading on him as he waited for what he knew would follow. And then it happened. He found her crying in a rarely used corridor one afternoon just as everyone was leaving. He had ducked in and asked what was wrong. "It's nothing," she said, smiling weakly. But could he stay a bit and comfort her? Bien had stayed. He really meant to lend an ear, to be a friend instead of just the guy who told corny jokes whenever they would meet. But before he knew it, they were kissing and he was leading her to his car and they were driving off. Still entwined, her lips on his neck and her hand between his legs, his other hand straining at the buttons of her blouse in between shifting gears. Like the Alice chip, this one presented itself exactly as he remembered it, the whole thing heightened by the voyeuristic experience of watching it on screen. He had driven her to her apartment and had followed her up to her bedroom, and had the kind of sex he thought only happened in adult movies. But just as he was getting to the part where he had most of Pia's clothes off and they were fumbling past the threshold of her bedroom, the image flickered, died. "What the fuck?" he swore, tugging loose at the VV straps. "What happened?" "That's a problem with this technology," said Rodel, who had been watching calmly. "These chips can only go certain length. As you've seen, this one is longer and clearer than the first one." "I want them all. I don't care how much," Bien said. Rodel smiled. "I knew you'd come to like them. 1,000 each? Oh, plus another 2,000 for the second part of Pia. We both know how that left you hanging." Bien cringed, embarrassed that Rodel should be so knowledgeable about his intimacies, just because of a faceless doctor had misplaced what was supposed to be a routine insertion by a few millimeters. He let Rodel scan his forehead, took the paper bag that Rodel handed him, and emptied out the contents, taking care while extricating the chips, 6 of them, from their bubble wrapping. He read their labels, checking to make sure they were right, that there wasn't one that, like Alice, he had forgotten. "Sheila's here," he said weakly. "Of course she is," Rodel said. "What do you expect?" "I thought there was someone else I had forgotten," Bien said. "I'm still with her. I know what we've been through. I don't need this chip." "Ah, yes," Rodel said. "You're marrying her tomorrow. Don't worry, I didn't charge you for hers. Think of it as a wedding present." "I don't want it," Bien said. "Don't think you remember everything," Rodel said. "Besides, that chip is my masterpiece. I put a lot of effort into it and I'm sure you'll see how it surpasses all the others, especially where time is concerned." "You mean this hasn't happened yet?" Bien asked. "I didn't say that," Rodel smiled. He expertly rewrapped the chips and handed them to Bien. "Good luck on your wedding," he said, ushering him out into the mall. Around him, mall activity continued as if nothing had happened. Bien looked at the paper bag he held in his hand. He was still trembling. A man approached him, his hand lifting the flap of the photographer's jacket that he wore. "Boss X," he asked. Bien shook his head. No thanks, he said, walking away. He was relieved when the man did not follow. The end. So how was that? A little bit creepy, not entirely scary, but if you come to think of it, it is scary. Imagine someone or anyone could hack into a microchip in your brain and access all of your memories without you knowing, and then being distributed in the black market just like that. I could not imagine how terrifying that would be. This is why, if there was an opportunity for that kind of technology, I will not grab it. I will go the traditional way. Write down all of my thoughts or tiny bits and pieces of what my memory would give me and write it down. So, how about you? Would you want a technology like that? Anyway, thank you so much for listening today. That's it for today's Stories in the Dark. Until next time. Goodbye.